Lots of room. He's 40. Like a rocket. Look at Ginty go. Breaks a tackle. He's 20. He's 10. He's touchdown.
Here's a long run. Oklahoma State gonna do it again, and guess who? Big O to the house.
Milroe gonna run it again. Got a lane. Kicked in the turbo. Milroe. Goodbye. Touchdown, Bama.
Pump fake. Cook. End zone. Caught. Touchdown. Luther Burden the third.
This is the CFF Site's Week 14 College Fantasy Football Show. My name is Joe DeSalvo, the voice of the CFF Site, and after a week off, I'm back. Fantasy leagues are done. Congratulations to all the winners if you happen to bag a championship this year. A lot coming up on this show. Super shout outs to the winners of the 4-1 Super Fantasy League. We're going to talk about, getting the breaks in week 13 and week 14, championship week and semifinal week, what it takes, why it's hard to win a college fantasy football championship. We're going to talk about week 15, conference championship games ahead, whether or not you guys want to put something together for a 1-week fantasy league. You have the option to do that. And then, from there, we're just going to kind of go into college football playoff discussion, and I'll give you my thoughts on where we stand headed into the weekend. So not a heavy college fantasy football show, but a college football show nonetheless. So let's just start off by congratulating all the winners in all the college fantasy football leagues this past week. And of course, if you've supported the CFF Site this year or in any years, we appreciate the sport. On behalf of my partner, Mike Bainbridge, I thank you guys. We both thank you guys. We do a lot of work in the preseason, regular season between Mike's DFS write-ups. He does the weekly waiver wire reports for you guys. I work on all the projections all week long, do some of the notes and observations, do a lot of the back scene, a lot of the backstage stuff with the site as well. And then, it's a culmination of everything that we've worked on in the preseason. It's college fantasy football, right? So, we try to lay the foundation in May and June when we launched the preseason fantasy draft guide. It's all about making adjustments, hitting that waiver wire. College fantasy football, most of the time, is won on the waiver wire. I've mentioned that a few weeks back. It's no different every year. You need a few breaks, need some luck, need some things to work out your way injury-wise, and you need some things to work out with the schedule too. I'm going to get into that. But let's just start at the top. The 4-1 Super Fantasy League. The CFF hosts this. I put this together every year. We've been doing it for a number of years. I think we might even be like in the 10th year of the Super Fantasy League. It started out as just one league, then it was a 2-1, 3-1. Now it's a 4-1. So 4 different formats, 4 champions, 4 runner-ups. Let's just start with the overall champion, Love Two Lins. Congratulations. Love Two Lins was ahead for most of the year, lost the lead there in the last couple of weeks, but came back to reclaim the championship over Fosh Chan, who finished second in the head-to-head league. Shout out to Heath Boyd, who beat out Tris Spoke, who finished in second. So congrats to those two finishing first and second in the two halves tourney. The last team that registered in the Super Fantasy League this past year went by the team name New Team 81 in Discord. He is Meeps. Wish he'd have used that name. It was more fun. But anyway, congratulations to New Team 81 for winning the two halves tourney over Love Two Lins, who won the first half tournament, lost the championship, but the only person to place first or second in more than one league this year. And in the Eliminator, Blackbeard's Delight took that title over Liebfried. And Blackbeard's Delight, one of those guys that have been in the Super Fantasy League back in the early days. He's won a few of these. So he just adds another championship onto his Super Fantasy League belt. Congratulations to all 8 of you guys. Those leagues, it's a grind. I get it. But the feedback that I get from all of you guys is that it's hard to keep up with. It's fun. It helps you in other aspects when it comes to waiver wire additions because you always have to be looking for those weekly gems. But super shout out to everyone that joined this 4-1 Super Fantasy League this year. And a special congratulations to all 8 of you guys. Well, 7, because we had a 2-time winner as well. But I mentioned this leading up to week 13 and the week 12 show, because the week 13 for me, that's what I call the money week, right? Because you can go all in week 14, the championship week, but you have to win in week 12 to get there. You've got to go all chips in the middle of the table in the semifinal week, because you can't win a championship unless you're playing for one, and you can't play for one unless you get there. And I always thought that the semifinal week was the most important week of the season because most of you guys play in money leagues, and the majority of the pot is in first and second place. So I always felt that at least if you finish second, you were in a position to make some money. And then from there, you do what you have to do, play the waiver wire. Because at that point of the season, especially for you guys playing in redraft non-keeper leagues, commissioners should have all other teams in the league at that point not be able to make a transaction. The only teams that should be able to make transactions at that point should be the 2 teams that are remaining, and if there's possibly a consolation game with the 3 and 4 for third place with the 2 other teams remaining. But, once the playoffs hit, all other teams should not be allowed to make any acquisition. So then you could play the waiver wire for the championship and play some matchups, because fantasy leagues, here's the thing. It's hard to win fantasy leagues. Sometimes it's easier to get there than it is to win it. You need to have a little luck on your side. Why is it so tough to win a college fantasy football league? There's a number of factors, right? One, week 14 is usually a rivalry week, right? So there's a lot of really contested matchups. I'll just reference the Ohio State-Michigan game, right? Rivalry game. No one saw that coming. Anybody with OSU assets didn't really get to do too much, or they didn't do much at all. Then you have injuries where it's a roll of the dice. For you guys that were sitting on Colton Joseph, the quarterback for Old Dominion, we get word that he's not playing in the game. So some of you guys that started him that do not have an auto sub feature get stuck with a 0 at quarterback. And Joseph was a waiver wire gem, one of the best fantasy quarterbacks through the last 5-6 weeks of the season. He doesn't play in week 14. You got your Corey Brooks at Louisville. And I'm just throwing a few names out, for example, right? Gets injured early in the game, doesn't put up any points. You have Mekhi Hughes for Tulane. They play that Thanksgiving evening, or it was a Friday evening game. I think it was Thanksgiving. He didn't score a touchdown. It was the only game this year in which Mekhi Hughes did not score a touchdown, and it happened to be in championship week. You had John Mateer, Washington State, been a stud all year long. Only 2 touchdowns in the championship game when a lot of his fantasy owners were really banking on a big game. You had Ollie Gordon, who, for a while there, middle of the season, people were ready to dump him. He gets hot at the end of the year. And all of a sudden, when you need him most in the championship, coming off of that big performance the week before against Texas Tech, he doesn't do anything. The Cowboys get blanked in a rout against Colorado. And then, you have some things that don't necessarily go your way, could be the right or wrong decision, because you look at semifinal week, guys that had Bryson Washington, running back of Baylor, for the 2 weeks leading up to the semifinals in week 13, he had run for 7 touchdowns in the 2 weeks prior, 3 and 4. Had 7 touchdowns in the 2 weeks leading up to the semifinal week. He doesn't score a touchdown in the semifinals, and then scores 2 more in the week of the finals. So some of you guys that had Washington didn't really get a touchdown in week 13, may not have had him available in week 14. And then you had a guy like DJ Giddens, who really couldn't find the end zone much this year. He was a yardage guy. And some of you may have sat him in the semifinal week, and he had his biggest fantasy game of the year where he ran for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. And yet in week 14, He did run for, he had over 100 yards, scrimmage yards, but didn't find the end zone. So you have some players, and then you also, and the other reason why some of the other reasons why it's hard to win too is that you run into these guys or you run into teams that get into the playoffs and they just so happen to have hot players at the right time, right? And that's another reason why it's so hard to win a college fantasy football championship. Think about the teams that snuck into the playoffs with a Lenoris Sellers at quarterback, right? And then he just blows up the last 4 weeks. Maybe if in the full FBS format, and you had Parker Navarro on your roster, quarterback for Ohio, or you were playing against him, right? Just that's what makes it hard. Sometimes you just run up against a team that gets hot at the end of the year. It's just a bad week, rivalry week. Maybe you have a bad matchup in week 14. And the hard part about the playoffs, whether it's week 13 or week 14, it only takes one bad week. One bad week can do it, which is why I say, when you're playing college fantasy football and you're at the back end of the season, you have to start as you get close to the playoffs. When you're getting into week 11 or 10, you have to start looking at the matchups in the semifinals and start building your roster around semifinal week 2 to 3 weeks in advance, even if it means costing you a spot in the playoffs or getting knocked out in the first round, because to me, week 13 is the most important week of the college fantasy football season. And I'd rather know that I kind of had my team built for that week 13 to get in the championship and get there. Maybe just fall short, but I just think strategically it's the way to do it. I think it's approach for a lot of you new guys playing. You have to start thinking about that semifinal week a couple of weeks in advance, even if you are in survival mode, because I know in a couple of leagues that I've seen, some of the lower seeded teams have won leagues. And I'm sure that's happened to some of you guys out there where teams maybe they had 6 playoff teams. Maybe it was only 4 and you had a semifinal week. There are some teams out there that have won leagues in the 4 seed in a 2-week playoff, or as a 6 seed where maybe 6 teams get in, top 2 get a bye. So it takes a little luck to get in. Sometimes it takes bad luck to win. It takes good luck to win. And that's what makes championships so hard to win in college fantasy football. But if you get there, you get the money. And it's a nice consolation prize. So, look, here's the deal. The transfer portal is hot and heavy. There's a lot of names in the transfer portal already. I feel like I could rattle off a lot, but I just feel like at this particular point, feels a little silly. There's going to be a ton of names that enter the transfer portal all off season long. It's going to be a merry-go-round. Is it a ploy just to leverage themselves to get more money? Are they going to end up at other schools? It's going to be fun. I do think that there needs to be some regulation to this, but you can't blame the players. It's the system we have. It's the system they're going to take advantage of. And until that happens, we're not going to see much settle down, at least not anytime soon. So the transfer portal is going to be a constant watch between now and the end of the season through the off season. And it's always been a pain for us when it comes to preseason content, because it always seems like guys are even jumping at the end of spring. And I remember Mike and I this past year doing the preseason fantasy draft guide and making edits just when we thought we had it done. We had to go back to the drawing board and make a few changes because guys are jumping in and out of programs, well into deep into the summer before camp starts. And that's just the way it is. It's the nature of the beast. It's how it's going to be for a little while. And we just kind of have to live with it. So I'm hoping to do some shows here as we go into the offseason, maybe leading up to the championship. We've got all the way through January 20th. We still have a lot of college football. We've got college football playoffs. But we have a big championship week ahead here. Let's just go through those games real quick. You got Western Kentucky playing at Jacksonville State. It's a rematch of this week's game. I think you got to like Jacksonville State at home. I know they're a 4.5-point favorite. They won that game this past weekend. I think they win again. UNLV playing at Boise. The Broncos are a 4-point favorite. Hard to go against Boise State right now if there's a team in the Mountain West who I think could take them down. might be UNLV, but Boise gets a home game, and I think that's a big advantage. Tulane, the only road favorite on the schedule this week in games that are not considered a neutral site. That one makes me a little nervous after watching Tulane this past weekend against Memphis. I think Army could keep that game close. I had hope for Tulane that maybe there was an outside chance for them for the college football playoffs, being from just outside of New Orleans. I would have liked to have seen that, but I think Boise's going to go ahead and grab that spot. Iowa State playing Arizona State. Sun Devils are 2.5-point favorite, even losing Jordan Tyson at wide receiver. When you look at it, I just when you look at these schedules, I think for me, I just don't know who on the schedule Iowa State, other than that 1-point win against Iowa. There's nothing really impressive on that schedule. Arizona State's won a couple of decent, good games here at the end of the season. I really like the style. I think the Sun Devils could win that game even without Jordan Tyson. Ohio at Miami of Ohio. Red Hawks 2.5-point favorite. Rematch from a game earlier this year. I just think the Red Hawks, the defense, they're going to find enough offense, and I think their defense is going to be enough to to at least maybe quiet Parker Navarro in that Ohio offense just a little bit. I like the Red Hawks in that game. You have Marshall traveling on the road to play at Louisiana. I think that could be a 50-50 game, even though the Raging Cajuns are a 5.5-point favorite and they are a home team. I do think, Louisiana wins that game, but I think that game could be close. You have Georgia playing Texas. Texas, a 2.5-point favorite in this matchup. Quite honestly, I could see a coin flip in this game. If I had to pick one right now, I would take the Longhorns, just because I don't know if Georgia has really impressed me. I've got thoughts as I get to the college football playoffs about some of the teams and where I stand. I think every team is beatable this year. This is the one year where I think we do not have a clear-cut number one team. And it's going to be a fun playoff. And there's going to be debate on who gets in, but I'd rather there be debate on who gets in at 11 and 12 than who gets in at 3 and 4. So whatever happens, whatever the committee does, I can live with. We're going to get a 12-team playoff. We're going to do, by the way, while I mention this, college football playoff fantasy league. Details are on the website. Registration is going to be coming up in the next couple of days. It'll be first come, first serve. We'll try to do a number of leagues, and you can sign up for as many and participate in as many as you want. Those will be money leagues, so we'll have some details coming on the site. Some of the details on the league specs are already posted. So go ahead and check it out if you're interested. And when we go live with those leagues, feel free to register. Oregon, 3.5-point favorite against Penn State. I think that game could go either way. Clemson, 2.5-point dog to SMU. And, I guess this is where we'll transition into college football playoff talk, because I kind of like Clemson in this game. And, the one thought that I have is this. When it comes to the college football playoff, I see 8 teams as pretty much a lock right now. Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, Ohio State from the Big Ten. I don't see how those 4 don't get in. When you look at the SEC, you've got Texas and Georgia in. I think even if one of those teams lose, they're still in. And I think you have Tennessee, and then you have Notre Dame. Those are the 8. The debate becomes whether or not Clemson, SMU, if Clemson wins that game, does SMU deserve to be in? And I have to tell you, if you really go look at SMU's schedule, I'm not really sure. And look, let me just say this. If you look at the ACC schedule, if you look at Clemson, if you look at Miami, and you look at SMU, there's nothing about any one of those teams' schedule that's impressive. The one thing that has helped those teams might actually be the thing that hurts them. And that was Miami, Clemson, and SMU did not play one another throughout the season. Those 3 teams did not play against one another. And in the end, I think that's actually going to end up hurting the ACC, because I really feel, looking at the schedule and looking at the resumes, I just feel the winner of the ACC game gets in. And I can't say that Miami's better than SMU or Clemson. I don't know how Miami is even in the conversation to get one of the 12 spots in the college football playoff because I don't think Miami's as good as Clemson or SMU. But again, like I said, the thing that's helped the ACC possibly could be the thing that hurt them, and we'll see how it shakes out. And that is Miami, Clemson, and SMU did not play one another. We could make a debate. Had they played one another, maybe they knock one another out. But it also may have helped them if they would have beaten one another by getting each other in. So to me, the schedules didn't do any favors to the ACC, and I think they went ahead and I think the schedule is going to hurt them more than help them, and I think those teams not playing one another until they get to the ACC championship ultimately is the demise of the ACC this year because you're going to have Boise State likely to get in with their win over UNLV. The winner of ASU, ISU gets in the game. And then for me, I think you're looking at 3 spots. And for me, I don't think Miami's in the conversation. I think it really just comes down to Alabama versus South Carolina, in my opinion. And, this is going to be, to me, especially, and I think this is more of a clear-cut argument if SMU wins. Because if SMU wins, Clemson's definitely out, right? And I just don't think Miami's as good as Clemson. So I don't see how either one of those two teams are even in the college football playoff. But when you've got Alabama, you've got South Carolina. South Carolina lost on the road at Alabama. Okay? So Alabama beat South Carolina at home, but South Carolina, with the impressive win over Clemson at the end of the year, to me, has the better resume. And so not only that, but if South Carolina only had 2 losses up until this point, I think they would be a slam dunk to be in the college football playoff. So if you look at South Carolina's schedule, you just have to go back to the LSU game. South Carolina had a pick 6 against LSU that was overturned because of a bogus penalty that was called on a block on Garrett Nussmeier after he threw the interception. That was with 6 minutes to play in the game. If that call stands, if that call was never made and that interception, that pick 6 stands, South Carolina beats LSU. They only have 2 losses. And I think they're a slam dunk to be in the college football. So whether or not the committee looks at that stuff, or then you can have people say, well, you know what? You got to take head-to-head into account. And Alabama beat South Carolina. They only beat them by 2 points, and they won at Alabama. But when you look at the schedule, when you look at the teams that Alabama lost to on the road at Vanderbilt, right? They lost, they beat South Carolina, but they lost bad at Oklahoma at the end of the year. Yeah, they have the win over Georgia. But when I look at the schedule, it's like, I don't know. And I've been a big fan of the SEC, right? So I feel like I'm a little scattered about, right now. I've been a big fan, coming from a Nebraska fan. I've been a big fan of the SEC. I just think it's the best conference. I don't know if it's the best conference this year. We don't really have those top 2 heavy teams in the SEC. We'll see if the playoff proves me wrong. But I feel like 1 through 3, the Big Ten might be better than the ACC this year. But I don't really see a dominant team. I could see a case where Oregon wins. I can see a case where Penn State wins it all. I can see where Texas can win it all. Their front 7 on both sides of the ball is phenomenal. Georgia, I feel like something's missing. I feel like Texas, something's missing. But Penn State doesn't really have the whole package. I don't feel Oregon's got the whole package. I think Indiana really, just the schedule helped them out. I don't think Indiana really deserves to be in here, but I think they're going to go ahead and probably win a playoff game now because to me, there's so much talk about whether or not Indiana even deserves to be in here. They're probably going to win a playoff game. I think Notre Dame's just as good as any team in the playoff. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you have to feel really good about your odds to win the playoff. And so for me, when it comes down to Alabama, South Carolina, I don't really think Alabama can win the playoff. I think if Alabama gets in, they win one game maybe, and they probably get cooked. I'd rather see Lenora Sellers in the college football playoff because to me, he's going to be more exciting for the college football playoff, in my opinion, than Jalen Milroe, who I just feel like is not it. So I feel like if 7 of those first 8 teams that I listed, minus Indiana, I feel could win the national title. And I didn't bring up Tennessee. And the reason I didn't bring up Tennessee, and this was probably an unpopular opinion on here. Maybe it's my hot take. I feel like Tennessee's the best team in the SEC on both. They may not have the most potent offense, but I love the ground game. I really like the defense. They've shown that they can play against the big dogs all year. And I really feel that Josh Heupel's play calling can be the difference maker. And right now, I might take Tennessee on a neutral field against any other team in the SEC. And maybe Texas is the only one I feel that would be in that conversation. But I don't think Georgia. I think if they play Tennessee on a neutral game earlier in the year when they won that game at home against Tennessee, I feel Tennessee on a neutral field would win that game. I just think Tennessee is going to be very tough to beat. I think Notre Dame is going to be a tough team to beat. Texas is going to be tough, and I think Penn State's going to be tough. And I'm curious to see where Oregon falls. And look, I can't see OSU. That would at one point this year, I felt like there were three teams that I couldn't see getting blown out no matter who they played, that were going to be in every game that they played this year, no matter who they played. And that was Oregon, Texas, and Ohio State, because of how physical they were, how big they were, how fast they were. I feel like all three of those teams, they're going to be in every game that they play. Look, I know Ohio State just lost to Michigan, but they were in the game. I think those defenses are good enough that are going to keep them in the game. I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out. It's a long talk about the college football playoffs. We still have another week to get there before we even get settled into the 12-team tournament. But it gives us, it's fun. It gives us something to talk about. And I just feel it comes down to Alabama, South Carolina for that final spot. And, my opinion is I'd like to see Lenore Sellers and South Carolina get the shot. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to put a lot of stock in that head-to-head matchup. We're going to get Alabama. But look, there's some of you guys that might be a fan of that because you want to see Alabama get in and you want to see them get cooked. And I don't think Bama can win more than one game in the college football playoff anyway. But we'll see how it shakes out. And look, I'm on the line here. I've been saying it. I even put it in Discord. I like Tennessee. I like Tennessee. I think they're going to be a tough team if they catch the right draw, have a legitimate shot to win it just as much as any other SEC or Big Ten team in it. But listen, that's going to do it for this week. We'll try to do this show again leading into the college football playoff. There's not a lot to play for college fantasy football, but who doesn't like talking college football? It's my passion. It's what I like. And gives us a chance to really look at things from a non-biased perspective because we really don't have any college fantasy football going on this weekend. So sit back, relax, enjoy the championship week games, and I'll see you guys next week. Till then.